Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
The search for justice can drive you to some pretty crazy places, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about state of the industry, current projects, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion, which is how we like to do it here. And if you like how we do it, we'd love it if you subscribe to the podcast. You can do that basically wherever you find your podcasts, over at Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. It's all good. And plus, you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd love it if you'd follow us on social media. If you could do that at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates, that'd be great. And also, finally, and probably most importantly, if you can pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, and some TV too. You know, anything moving image-wise we love talking about, and we love it when you read about it. So that's basically what we do over there. So we would love it if you went and checked us out. And on this one, we got a good one. We are talking, well, no, it's an indie film, festival film, starting to do its run around the circuit. It's called Disrupted, and it's a real interesting thriller that was playing at the CineQuest Film Festival, and also playing Sacramento and a few other places last year. And it's basically a revenge story when a widower, his thirst for justice tends to be sort of rekindled when a local murder is oddly similar to the unsolved murder of his wife years ago. And we sat down not only with filmmaker Andre Welsh, but we sat down with the star Chioke Jelani Clinton as well, and just talked about the making of the film and their experiences thereof and influences and kind of why they got into the business. And it was a fun talk, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you want to check out the film, I do recommend it. You can find it on Prime, Tubi, and a few other places. And that's about it for me, and I hope you enjoy our talk. Congratulations on the movie. Walk me through sort of the inspiration for the story.
So yeah, it originally started with wanting to do a story about gentrification in the Bay Area. Just growing up in Oakland and then living in San Francisco for a while and seeing all the changes that were rapidly happening and just the different kinds of people that were getting squeezed out of the city, and also Oakland eventually, and just, you know, flat out just not being able to afford it. So I kind of wanted to do a story about that, but then and have the main character, you know, be you know, in his 50s or 60s, like he's been there for a while. But instead of doing a drama, something too serious, I wanted to have more of a thriller, noir thriller kind of backdrop story with it, and integrate a venture capitalist psychopath. Yeah, so yeah, just kind of weaving in those two characters together, and how the changes of the tech industry have really affected the Bay Area and gentrification and kind of weaving in all those things.
And I love how and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were also the cinematographer and you shot this, because I was struck by just the look of the film. It seemed very sort of aware of its surroundings, and just like it was really crafting some amazing looking shots to sort of amp up the tension as everything went along.
Thank you. Yeah. I also work as a DP quite a bit, and so I like to work kind of guerrilla style on the fly. So we did a lot of stuff where, you know, we're just using available light, you know, in real locations. So just kind of making do with whatever we got. But I think it kind of helps add to the gritty factor, because there's a lot of parts of San Francisco and Oakland, you know, that just have a really cool gritty look to them, especially with the fog and you know, the grays and blues that you get.
For sure. Now, I mean, talk to me a little bit just about your casting process as well, because I really enjoyed the cast and everyone seemed to fit pretty well. And I mean, especially when you're doing sort of a independent film, you don't necessarily always have, your first choice. Like, walk me through your process on that, on getting the right people together to make the film.
Yeah, good question. So I knew it was, we were going to be with a limited budget. And so keeping that in mind, I always, try to cast all the best people I can. And so Ron Cale, who plays Pete, I had actually worked with him on a couple of projects before that. And so I wrote the part for him in mind. So the script went through, I think, 14 drafts. His character, kind of obviously evolved, but really just knowing, playing to Ron's strengths as an actor, and he has kind of a good noir kind of low voice. So that's my Ron impression. But so I knew I was going to have him play the lead, and then Chioke Jelani. I also wrote the part for him, as well as Aku to play Jay and Prez. So again, knowing what they can do. Jelani's great with improv, so we had a lot of fun doing some of the lighter hearted comedic scenes with some improv in there. And then, so really the only person we had to audition quite a bit for was Harry, played by Jeffrey Lower. So we actually auditioned 65 people until we found him. It was such like a specific role. And I just didn't, I know a lot of great actors, but I just didn't have anybody in mind that I could think of that could just fit right in with that. So yeah, he was tough to find. And once we got him, he really just kind of took the character and ran with it, just made it his own.
This must have been an interesting one for you, Chioke, if I pronounced that right. I mean, it's not every day you get something written for you.
Right, definitely. So, it's one of the dreams of, being an actor is to have a role that's written, specifically with ourselves in mind. So, yeah, it was definitely a treat.
Were you on board right away? Because I mean, it's one of those things where I can always imagine that, you wrote it for, like, I could imagine being almost taken aback by someone writing something for you.
I was definitely on board. I've worked with Andre a lot of times over the years. We've been close for close to 20 years. So, I'm always impressed by whatever he's working on, whether I'm, involved with it or not. So anytime he comes with something, he's and I tell everybody this, and I've always felt like this since I saw some of his earliest projects that he used to do when we first met. He's my favorite filmmaker because, he kind of combines a lot of my other favorite filmmakers like over the years, so, if we're talking about, Hitchcock to, Sergio Leone to, Scorsese, he just has a lot of these elements that make those filmmakers great within his style. So anytime he has something, especially, that he had me in mind for, I'm definitely on board always.
Now, I guess for both of you, how does it help the creative process to be able to have that sort of secondhand if you've known each other for so long?
Oh, it's way easier. I think. Yeah, I love writing stuff for Jelani. Again, kind of like with Ron, just, Jelani's got that great deep voice. And so you could just have a lot of fun writing dialogue for him. It's pretty endless, endless combinations of dialogue you can write. So, and then it's very collaborative with Jelani, so a lot of times he'll have questions ahead of time, when I'm still writing the script. I think he's probably, along with Ron Cale, he's the only actor who read every draft of the script. So I felt like he was probably, he knew the script better than I did by the end. So yeah, just knowing the trust factor there, and just knowing, he kind of knows what I'm looking for even before I ask it. So he's just really easy to work with.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing, that trust between us as creative partners, as artists, is probably the best thing that, we could have, when collaborating on a project with one another, because I know for myself, just being able to, contact him, you know, almost any time of the day or night, and be able to ask him about something pertaining to the character and how he sees it being portrayed. Is just always good. For me as a performer, I always like to be able to go to the source material in anything, whether that be the actual book, but whenever you can actually speak to the screenwriter, which, we as actors don't always get to speak to the screenwriter, but in this case we have, and we were able to do that. So, I just look at that as a bonus, and, feel very fortunate that I'm able to do that and help in helping to prepare for the role.
Now, I mean, something else about the film that really struck me is just sort of its focus on the violence. And I mean, I had never sort of married sort of the issues around gentrification, around sort of violence, but when you think about it, it is very much a violent upheaval for the people that it kind of affects. And I'm kind of curious for both of you, but particularly Andre, how important was it to sort of marry a little bit of not just the thriller, but just sort of having this violence in this universe to sort of to hammer home the point that you want to make?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I just felt like the character of Harold just he just kind of felt like he could get away with anything. And because he drives a Tesla and lives in a house in the peninsula and has his venture capital firm, and just kind of very, very well regarded. He's basically just a really high functioning psychopath. And so I wanted it to kind of represent the tech industry takeover, because there is currently actually a lot of these tech companies are slowly moving to Texas because the taxes are better. But yeah, I mean, just there was always tech in the Bay Area, but it just seemed like it just reached a new level in the last 6 or 7 years. And there's definitely like some semblance of arrogance, I think, that comes along with it. And a lot of people resent some of the tech industry, especially the people that did get kicked out of the Bay Area and just not only can they not afford to live there, but literally their apartments would be torn down, and or they just replace the countertops with granite countertops, and suddenly the rent is tripled, stuff like that. So yeah, it's you just see the changes, and it's kind of sad. Yeah, so I felt like Harry, the character Harold, really just represented that hostile takeover part of the tech industry.
Yeah, I would agree also. I think that sometimes, we forget that, when we have ones that are being displaced due to economic hardships, that, this is a symptom of warfare, it's economic warfare. So one thing that I appreciated with this film as a viewer was getting to see how different types of characters were responding to, this war being waged upon them, and how these things, really have no bearing on whether an individual is male or female, no matter what their color of their skin is. Everyone in different positions of life can be affected by these types of things when this happens. So, it's definitely an interesting take on these things that are very prevalent in our society.
And it is such a cold process too. It really does show how, especially when these issues, the color it comes down to is green, not black or white. It comes
Right.
down to money, which is the disgusting thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, I'm curious, because I love some of the references that you've mentioned before, but I always like to ask this of people. Like, if you can think back into your careers, into your lives, was there a moment or a movie that sort of was the pivot point for you that made you decide to go, okay, I want to be a filmmaker, I want to be an actor?
Oh yeah, I think for me, I loved Good, the Bad, the Ugly when I was a kid, but so I think it kind of inspired me to buy my first VHS camera when I was 11.
Right.
Saved up my allowance for 10 months or whatever, bought a used VHS camera that didn't even have a battery. So I had a 400-foot extension cord that would constantly get tangled up. And we'd make, karate movies. All the movies were always kind of, violent or whatever. But yeah, I think the one that for me really inspired me was Usual Suspects. I think I saw it when I was maybe in seventh grade, I want to say. And there's just something about that film, the way the dialogue, the way it was shot, everything. I was like, okay, this is definitely what I want to learn how to do that. So that was the film. I think that was maybe 95 or 96.
Yeah, like Andre, my favorite film to this day is probably still The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I really appreciate that entire Man with No Name trilogy. Um, Watching a lot of different films, I know, like with my grandfather when I was a child, so I really used to like, the original Magnificent Seven. I really used to like the performances of Yul Brynner. Um, and I would say probably with him, although there was a lot of different actors that, both male and female, that I really admired. I probably really appreciated Yul Brynner and the Magnificent Seven. And then, you could watch him do something else, like his performance in The King and I. And, I just always thought he was cool. He was, I just liked his look, I liked the way he spoke, liked the way he carried himself and portrayed the different characters that, that he was able to leave us. So.
Well, I agree with you both. Yul Brynner was the best, and Sergio Leone never gets enough love as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, I'm curious because, and this is something I think your film does quite well. In today's media landscape, there is such a hard balance of trying to make stuff that, on one end, will be a little different, can stand out, can say something, but at the same time also be sellable and be marketable. And I'm kind of curious, from both your perspectives, how do you sort of walk that line as artists?
Yeah, I think it's tough because you look at, there's formulas that work and they work for a reason. So, I always try to think of that, but at the same time, my favorite films, probably a lot of them wouldn't even get made today because they don't follow a formula that is necessarily sellable or marketable, or maybe it's just less sellable. So it kind of saddens me a little bit. So you do have to kind of keep that in mind, I think, when you're writing a script or just trying to raise money to do a movie, because obviously it's a big investment and it's a lot of time that you're spending and you want it to be successful. But yeah, I think for me, my favorite films, my favorite filmmaker is Steven Soderbergh. I love, that he does a lot of his own stuff. He DPs or edits or, obviously directs and writes sometimes. But a lot of his films, they're just, he's really good about having it still be entertaining and fun to watch, but still has a message and is just good filmmaking, and trying to walk that balance isn't always easy to do, but I think he's somebody I look up to that does that well.
I think there's always a difference in what I would consider a pure artist and a compromise artist, and I would say with the pure artist, he or she creates their art and they're not really trying to get into the business of selling that art. They may not even be interested in having anybody else view that art. And as amazing as I think that we all are, and honored to be able to work professionally, we're compromise artists in the sense that, we have to compromise sometimes what we want to do, and balance that with, sometimes what needs to be done. no matter if it's coming from, one of the major studios or it's being done independently. If we want others to see it, then, you're always going to be looking at your artwork and saying, uh, you know, should I do this? Can I do this? How will an audience perceive this? And, you just find a balance and eventually just find that courage to, let everyone see it, and being able to, after it's released, just let it go. Obviously you want everyone to enjoy it, but you also know that, everyone's not going to enjoy it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't make or break us. It's why we create. It's why we do what we do. It's why we allow others to see it. But, I always have a lot of respect for those that I still consider pure artists. They create their masterpiece, their painting, and it's hanging in, their home somewhere, or maybe it's something that their child drew and it's attached to a magnet on the refrigerator.
Well, you know what? I think that's a good note to end on. But I just want to say congratulations to you both, and keep doing the good work. I mean, I think you guys found the line between sort of commercial and sellable for people to enjoy, and like you say, that thing that you can proudly put on the refrigerator and take real pride in at the same time. And congratulations again to you both on the film, and thanks again for the time.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.